Hello, Garland Nixon here, and the European Union as an entity is in deep and serious trouble. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and I'm up bright and early on a Friday morning as I get ready to go to Kingston, New York, of all places. Going to have a great event there. Let me see if I can find it. We're going to have an event with Judge Knapp and Scott Ritter and all manner of crazy peaceniks such as myself. So before I get going, let me see if I can show you. Hopefully, there we go. Let me show you what's going on this weekend. Maybe you'll be able to make it up to Kingston, New York. A Peace and Freedom rally. Live music speakers include Gerald Salente, Judge Andrew Napolitano, Scott Ritter, Joe Loria, he's the editor at Consortium News, Dennis Kucinich, former member of Congress, with Governor Garland Nixon, and Roger Waters from Pink Floyd. So maybe you'll be able to make it up there and hang out. Roger Waters will be live via satellite feed or whatever the heck. I don't know. I'm not the tech guy, but I know Roger Waters is going to be yapping there. So how cool will that be? Anyway, so let us talk. Let us yap about this thing. You know, when I think about I've been thinking about the European Union lately, and I thought about, you may have heard the term interregnum. You know, when the old is dead and the new is being born, right? This a period of time, and philosophically throughout history, many people have tried to discuss this period of time, this interregnum period of time, right? When the old is obviously gone and the new is being born. And I can think of a couple of things. You might have heard this term that somebody is out on their feet. He's out on his feet. What does it mean that somebody's out on his feet? Well, I saw one time in my life, I saw a person out on their feet, maybe more than once, but one I can think of, somebody got struck with an open hand. For those of you who don't know a lot about self-defense, man, a palm strike is a nasty, nasty thing. If somebody boot right on the chin, pow, right out, this thing comes, bam, bam, like a machine. Struck a guy on the chin, and he froze. Just like, the old lumberjack, like a tree. Again, a tree. You'll see somebody, boom, cut a tree, and they get to that last hit, and bam, and they'll stop. And you hear something going crack, 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 crack. And let's say they're shopping and they're sawing, you hear a crack, 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 and everybody runs to see which way the tree is going to fall. At that point, the tree is sitting straight up, but you can hear the fibers crack. You know that tree is out on its feet. That tree is done. That tree is going to fall. Now you're watching to see which way it falls, right? A period of time philosophically when the game is over and you're watching to see which way this doomed and dead tree falls, right? Where somebody, and I could keep going on and on with analogies, but again, self-defense, somebody's breathing in, out, in, but there's a period of time between the breath in and the breath out. There's just a slight hesitation between the in and out. Pow, you strike them then between those two breaths, and it can flutter a person's breathing. It can throw them off because, if you're breathing in or breathing out, your body's accustomed to it. If you did that spot right in between, they're not breathing in, but they're not breathing out. Right? The tree hasn't fallen yet, but the fall is inevitable because you can hear the fibers crack because it doesn't have enough fibers in the trunk to hold it up. All see what I'm getting at about when I talk about the European Union, that interregnum, that point when everybody's looking at it saying, "Ooh, this thing is so dead. This thing is done. This thing is fried. This thing is over." But it hasn't quite fallen yet. It hasn't quite gone yet. And so what's happening is this, if we look at the European Union like we look at a creature or something like that, a creature or whatever, right? It's dead. and it's trying everything it can to hold on to life. But everybody's looking at it. We listen to the fibers crack, 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 crack. Everybody's like, run, the tree's gonna fall. You ever cut down trees, right? Cut firewood, run, everybody. And everybody's seeing which way it's gonna fall. Is it gonna fall towards me and the other way? I gotta be ready to move, right? Hopefully you've notched it right and it's gonna fall in the direction you want it to fall, but you never can be sure. 100% sure, and you want to be prepped. Which way is this thing going to fall? And that's the bottom line. That's the analogy. People, the trunk is cut away from the European Union, chip by chip, axe swing by axe swing. You see pieces of wood fly every time you turn around. Hey, what's going on? Nord Stream's blown. Oh man, that's a big chunk of wood out of the way there, right? At that point, there are times things that happen when it kind of goes past halfway and you say this tree can't stand. The major blows, Nord Stream was it. At the point that Nord Stream was blown, there was no future for the Europe because its economic and industrial model, I don't have to go over this, but I'll say it, its economic and industrial model was based on cheap Russian energy. And as soon as you yank that cheap Russian energy from Europe, it was over. And one of these days, I suspect, I'm going to put my coffee, I had coffee, but I guess it's gone now. Oh no. Anyway, but, oh, there we go. I've already finished it. The people who blew Nord Stream, the people who wrecked the European economic model knew good and damn well what they were doing. Let's not forget John Bolton had a book, and in his book, one of the things that he talked about was that the neocons basically viewed China as a big economic threat, but also the European economy, the European economic bloc, ultimately as a threat. Look, there's no honor amongst thieves. And after thieves rob a bank, and when they start counting the money, let's say there's 4 of them and they got to divide it into 4 ways, right? I remember watching the movie Riddick, and these which was a great movie with Vin Diesel, and they had captured Riddick, who was a fugitive from justice, and they were going to get money for handing him in, and there was 5 criminals that had to divide the money 5 ways. And on the way taking him in, Riddick killed one of them, and they all looked at each other, and he didn't know what they were going to do, and they went, yes, 4-man split, right? They were happy that he killed one of them because that meant more money for all the rest. There was no honor amongst thieves. Hey, we're all trying to get paid here, and if one of the people die, that's more money for us, right? And so the U.S. empire, as it could see things contracting, as it could see the rise of Russia and China, said, we need less competition. And Europe is part of the competition. Unfortunately for Europe, the European leaders are too stupid to understand that they're next on the chopping block. So if they're willing to march right into the slaughterhouse, thank you very indeed. There had been, I remember seeing a video of Condoleezza Rice. I believe she was talking with Hillary Clinton, but I'm not sure. It was 2015, 2016. And then she was saying the Europeans are just going to have to understand and get used to it and accept that they're going to have to, get away from Russian energy. At that point, they're just going to have to understand and accept. What was she saying? It's going to be extremely painful for them, but they're just going to have to deal with it. Who cares? They got to do what they're told. We don't give a crap about the Europeans. The other part of it was this. I think one of the things that happened was the U.S. had to get the people in position in order to do this. It had to get, BlackRock, a former BlackRock CEO emeritus. It had to get a former Goldman Sachs Rothschild's bank puppet, Macron. It had to get Kaya Kallas and von der Leyen and Baerbock and all of its people, right? Its ideological sycophants. It had to get the people that it wanted, who had, I'm not going to break it out now, but I've done it many, many times. And if you've watched my show, you've probably seen that I got a book right here called Ally versus Ally from Tony Blinken. And in that book, he talks about something that philosophically that I think separates certain groups. And I think it illustrated the group that's in power now. Because what he said was, there are, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he mentioned a group which I assumed to be the group that he belongs to, the faction of the ruling elite, the faction of the foreign policy elite that he belongs to. And he talked about people who see, at that time, he was talking about the Siberian pipelines. He was talking about Russian pipelines of oil that was flowing to Europe. And that was very beneficial to the Europe economy. It was mostly oil then. This is the 1980s. And what he was saying is basically, I'm going to paraphrase it and interpret it the way I see it. My faction of the ruling elite sees, the faction of the ruling elite in Europe that's in power now. Again, I'm paraphrasing, so it's not exactly what he says, but this is my interpretation of it, but it's close. The faction of the ruling elite that was in power in the 80s, they saw their energy flow from Russia into Europe as purely economic. Hey, man, we're trying to eat, we're trying to make money. This is cheap oil. This is the way it works, is what it is. We're trying to benefit ourselves. Wherein Blinken's faction of the ruling elite saw it purely through the lens of geoeconomic advantage and was ready to take action. And I think he almost said this verbatim, regardless of the economic consequences for the European and American business community. So what he was saying is, my faction of the ruling elite don't give a damn if we wipe out your economy. We don't care about the working class people. Screw them. Okay. Back in the 80s, he was talking about this. What happened? In the same way that Tony Blinken eventually came to power, what actually happened was that faction of the foreign policy elite came to power. And subsequently, that faction of the ruling elite brought their allies, puppets, whatever you want to call it, like-minded lunatics, neocons, which is what we're really talking about, fascists, to power in Europe. And when I say brought them to power, I mean through extra democratic means, as you're seeing now in Romania, in Moldova, in France, on and on and on, in Germany. They have no power, they have no problem using extra democratic means. These people are fascists. They're totalitarian fascists. They hate democracy. The democracy does in no way in shape or form aligns with their view of the world, their Straussian view of the world that says people, the masses are stupid. We really don't like them. We have nothing but condescension toward the masses. They should shut up and do what they're told. We have to be concerned about our neocon, fascist, geostrategic view of the world. And, look, the masses just got to suffer. Now, to support my theory, look at what they've done. They blew Nord Stream. They could care less. And look at what Lindsey Graham is talking about now, who is a member of that group. What is he talking about now? Hey, look, we need to do massive sanctions against India, against China. He said, we're going to crush China's economy. We're going to crush India's economy. Here's the bottom line. What they don't care about, if you notice, what he didn't talk about, we're going to crush China's and Russia's economy. What he didn't talk about is the U.S. economy. It's like the opposite of America first, right? It is, look, we don't care about how it affects the masses. We're the ruling elite. We're always going to live good. The important thing is that we maintain, that we stand up for the U.S. empire. The U.S. empire, you could put it, U.S. hegemony, U.S. power, U.S. worldwide strength and domination. We want to dominate. And by we, I mean the ruling elite, not the working class. And if the working class have to suffer so that the ruling elite can dominate, so be it. This is minority rule here, the ruling elite. So what's going on now is this. Have been, actually, the U.S. ruling elite have been quite successful with Europe, because what they wanted to do was impoverish Europe, leave Europe in absolute struggle. And they were able to do it. And now the Trump administration, I think is simply saying, you know, we set up this big war in your region, and it ain't going so well as we wanted it to do to take Russia down. So here's what we're going to do. We did get some benefit out of it. We destroyed the economic viability of the European Union, who we saw as a competitor. Guess what? We want to go around the world and steal stuff, and now we don't have to split it with you. So, ha, 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 ha. Thanks a lot, suckers. We got bigger fish to fry. And I think that for all the talk now about Pete Hegseth bringing in a bunch of generals to meet, and people are like, oh no, it's World War III, they're going to attack Iran, then Russia, China, whatever. I think that it's more likely to be this, that what they're going to say to him is, there's a new defense posture review coming out, and that's going to say we're focusing on our area of the world and the home front. What's interesting is when the Trump administration first came in, I said something that I thought might be true. And then things happened and I thought maybe it wasn't true, which was this. I said, I think that the Trump administration may want to dominate their region of the world and say, you know what, Russia's too powerful, China's too, we can't fight them. And the world's changing. And so maybe let's just dominate, instead of trying to steal the stuff from Africa. Maybe we'll try to maintain hegemony in the Middle East, which they're trying to do by expanding their colony, expanding their military and intelligence base, which is their intelligence military outpost, which is also known as Israel. So we'll try to expand that and dominate the oil-rich region of the world, number one. Number two, we'll try to dominate the natural resources in our region, and that way, at least we'll have some level, and then eventually we can weaken China and Russia in the long run in a different way, and then we can, once again rule the world. I think and I just thought, man, that's a possibility. Now, and it doesn't mean they've given up on hegemony. It means that maybe they look at it and they say, well, let's try the plan that the traditional neocons had, which was to go slam head on into Russia and China, ain't working. So we're smarter than the traditional neocons. We have a different way we're going to rule the world. It still basically says we're going to rule the world. We're going to maintain rulership of the world. We're going to maintain domination of the world, but maybe one trick isn't working. So we'll try a different trick. At the same time, I suspect they will continue to, try their chicanery around the borders of Russia and China. They will continue to threaten and harass Russia and China, but maybe they'll try a different way than just straight up going head to head with them militarily. Now, I ain't saying that's 100% off the table. I'm just saying it's not a matter of what the outcome they want. It's a matter of what tactic they're going to take. And I think that this meeting coming up with all the generals with Hegseth is going to be a discussion about the path to domination. That's what it's really going to be about, the path to domination. They still intend for domination, but it's the path. Now, in speaking of Europe, I think the U.S. is kind of heading in the same direction as Europe, which is to, economic, political, moral, spiritual, diplomatic destruction. But I think Europe's there first. I think Europe's already there. Europe is at that point where that guy got hit on the chin with an open fist, and for a second he's there. Have you ever seen movies? Two people struggle and there's a gun and you hear a shot, boom, and you don't know which one shot, the good guy or the bad guy. Of course, it's always the bad guy, but you boom, and you see both of them freeze, and they both have the same exact look on their face, a look of neither life nor death, a look of neither happiness nor sadness, neither shock nor horror nor glee. It's bam, and they both at the same time go, and you're like, who got shot? Who got shot? And then one of them goes, boom, and he falls, the bad guy, and the good guy's still standing there. There is that philosophical moment in time where a person is neither alive nor dead, where the Schrodinger's cat of reality of life right? And I think that's where Europe is, because let's look at it a couple of things. Number one, where one last example, you're playing chess, guy makes a move, and the other guy looks, and he just scans the table, and he looks, and at that point he knows this game's over. Now there's still players on the table, there's still options, there's still moves that can be made. I can do this, but then he'll do that, and then that, and that. Oh, I'm done. I can go here. Oh, but then he'll do this, and I'm set up. Okay, I can do here. You've got multiple moves you can make, and you have two options. Shake his hand. This game's over, isn't it? Yeah. It's not over, but it is. It's not over because there are still moves that you can make, but it is over because everybody knows that the outcome is inevitable. It's done. That game is technically over. What do people generally do when the game's technically over? That wipe the table and start over again. Right? There's that period. What do you call that period? Where there are moves that can be made, but none of them will alter the outcome. None of them could possibly alter the outcome. Right? Let's look at Europe. A couple of things have happened. And why the reason that Europe is so toast, the reason it's so obvious is because not only are these things that result from long-term actions by Europe, but because the people in Europe, it seems to me, some of them can, but there are a lot of them that can't possibly get it, can't possibly sit there and say, well, this is because of what we've been doing for a long, long time. So a couple of things. Let's talk about immigration problems in Europe, right? Obvious issue with immigration from people all over the place, clearly. However, why are there so many Algerians in France? Why are there so many people from the Caribbean islands in and Pakistanis and stuff like that, and people from India in Great Britain? And you could go on and on. Is it a coincidence that the same countries that the British ruling elite and the European ruling elite plundered, um, attacked, bombed, overthrew, and that these people, these African countries, that the French, French, Francophone Africa, right? These countries that the European countries economically benefited off of, and a lot of people from these countries ended up showing up on their doorstep. Now, the ruling elite, of course, looked at it the same way the ruling elite looked at it when they went to their country. They went to, hey, let's go to Algeria. Why? They got stuff we could take, resources, all kind of stuff. We'll go there and take the resources, right? Well, now a bunch of Algerians or whoever, whatever, or that show up. You know what the ruling elite say? Oh man, this is great. We got free resources or cheap resources from the country X. Now we're going to get the labor. We're going to get cheap labor, because if we use French or German or Italian or British people, we're going to have to pay them a decent salary. And we don't want to do that. So we'll let people come in from this other country that we can lower the cost of labor. And the really beauty of it, and we'll convince the people here not to blame us and not to get mad at us because we're bringing these people in for cheap labor that we can screw over them, but to blame them. The ruling elite get to win three times. Number one, we get to go to their country and steal their gold and silver and oil. Number two, then we get to bring the people over here through our immigration policies and use them as cheap labor and to drive down the price of the indigenous labor. And lastly, we get to divide and conquer. So we get to get the people here to fight over immigration and to fight with the immigrants. So we win three times. So you guys are fighting over each other, and you didn't realize that we're screwing you to death and taking everything you got and trying to drag you into World War III. Great for the ruling elite. And the European people, as they say, fish discover water last. They're in this thing. They can't see it. The only thing they see is what they're told to see. Hey, a bunch of immigrants are overthrowing your country. Those darn immigrants. How dare they do that? Look, here's a perfect example. The Trump administration comes in screaming about immigration, right? And hey, I'm with you. We got a problem with immigration, no question. Immigration, you can't have a nation state without borders. And so your borders have to be secure. Now, let's not pretend that the ruling elite want them secure, because if the ruling elite want them secure, they'd be secure. They don't want them secure because they want a class of people that they can use to both exploit as cheap labor and to drive down the cost of indigenous labor. Of course, they want us to blame those people, not them. Okay. But think about this. So now Donald Trump is now threatening Venezuela, a country of 30 million, after he goes through all of this business to tell us about these Venezuelan, yes, there's Venezuelan gangs and Venezuelan uh, immigrants and Venezuelan this, and they're all over our country. They're throwing away things. They're taking everything we got. We got to stop the Venezuelans. What are you going to do? I'm going to go to that country and bomb. Well, what's going to happen then? We'll have a million Venezuelan immigrants at our border, who are refugees from war, who's under international law, if they apply for refugee status, will be inclined to accept them. And you know what they'll do? They'll bomb the hell out of Venezuela. They'll start a war there, which we won't win because we don't win any wars. And then when all of the Venezuelan immigrants show them up in the same way that they had started this war in Ukraine, and then they say, oh, we're going to accept 300,000 Ukrainian immigrants. They'll accept 3, 4, 800. They'll accept 1 million Venezuelan immigrants because they want them, number one. And number two, this is their policy. Look, they got oil. They got gold. They got large areas that they can farm in Venezuela, right? They want to take Venezuela's natural resources. And do they give a damn if 1 million Venezuelans show up at the border? No, that's a good thing for them. More cheap labor. And more something to get us to fight over. Hey, Americans, look at these darn Venezuelans here taking your jobs and their crime all over the place. They get to divide and conquer us. They get the cheap labor. They get to win. So, but get my point. Who's driving the immigration? The ruling elite. Who's benefiting from the immigration? The ruling elite. And how else do they benefit? They get us to fight amongst each other and to beat the immigrants over the head and then never see who's doing it. They're laughing all the way to the bank. So that's the number one issue. They've got huge problems of immigration in Europe, and the ruling elite has done it deliberately, and they are benefiting. Now, next. So they've got them there, but the British people are looking at the wrong people. The British, the Europeans, they can't see that the ruling elite are doing this. But that's one of the problems that they have, a huge immigration problem, which as their economies unravel, these people, the immigrants, will be at the bottom of the list and they'll be blamed the most. And then there'll be violence against immigrants, and immigrants will be violence against non-immigrants. And boy, everything gets to fighting and getting torn up and burned up. And the ruling elite will get the hell out of there. They'll be in South Florida or some damn where, Dubai, when all of this goes down. But again, that immigration problem is just going to exacerbate as far as people fighting amongst each other and causing violence in the street. And if things go bad enough, then the ruling elite will have somebody to blame. Never themselves, never their policies. Now, let's continue. So they created this European Union thing. Why? Because they don't believe in democracy. So they had to create an extra democratic, extra national organization where they could put people in that you didn't vote for, where they could put in people as members of parliament, stuff like that. And then those people who were their puppets could then choose a group of super puppets in EU that you have no say over whatsoever, that'll then say, we make the rules and you got to live by them. It was a NATO-esque kind of thing, right? A thing that takes the power out of the hands of the people. In fact, the people basically didn't have the power. The people have the illusion that they have some kind of democracy. And what the EU does, it evaporates even the illusion that there's any democracy. No illusion whatsoever. Instead, you're going to do what we tell you to do, and we're going to put Kaja Kallas's, we're going to put pure Nazis, not neo-Nazis, old school Nazis, Nazi Barbies, the Nazi princesses, the Annalita Baerbachs and the Kaja Kallas's, and people who go one generation back and to get to the goose steppers, 1-2 max generations back to get to the goose steppers, the Chrystia Freelands of Canada, which Canada is really a European country. So they're like, we're going to just put the Nazis in charge and move forward with that. And that's where they are. And you look at it politically right now, there is no There is very little illusion of democracy. So basically, you have now an entire block that has the people who Tony Blinken talked about. Basically, no concern whatsoever for business, interpreted as no concern whatsoever for the working class. And what do we see the results? We see the businesses crashing, collapsing. We see a crisis wherein the people cannot afford, even the people that are left working for factories can't afford what the factories produce. People that have jobs providing services can't afford the services. So what happens eventually? You get this die out where people are producing widgets, they're producing these scissors, but they can't afford to buy the scissors, right? So eventually, the job they have producing scissors goes out of business because they can produce scissors at a very, very inexpensive price that's marked up, and the owner of the company sells this pair of scissors for, a dollar. I don't know, I'm just gonna throw out a number for a dollar and makes 99-cent profit. Well, that's pretty good. So you have businesses that are streamlined down to the point where they make a great profit. Now, when you eliminate cheap energy, that profit goes down the toilet. But alternatively, what happens? I mean, alternatively, or excuse me, subsequently, what happens is the business just dies out because it can make cheap scissors, but nobody can buy the scissors. So all you have is warehouses full of scissors. That would be a good deal if anybody could afford them. But because inflation has gone up and salaries have stayed the same, which means they've effectively decreased, guess what? You're out of luck. You don't have an economy that works anymore. I mean, if you think about it, people are talking about, what we need to do? We need a universal basic income, right? We need the government to give everybody $2,000 a month, $4,000 a month, whatever, so they can survive, and then they can add on whatever they work. In other words, what you're really saying, the UBI argument is this economy doesn't work anymore. We don't have an economy wherein the people who work can afford to live. It's an admission of that. Therefore, the government has to just give people money because they can no longer work and make enough money to survive. Therefore, the government's got to give them X amount of dollars a month, which to some extent is true. But here's the problem with that, even the UBI argument, right? The problem with the UBI argument is it ain't going to stay static. You have a government, let's say you got to give the people, I'm just going to throw a number, $4,000 a month to survive. Prices are going up and everything's going bad. So you got to give them $4,000 a month just to survive. Within a year and a half to 2 years, you're going to have to give them $4,500 just to stay even. And then what? Then $5,000, then $5,500. Before you know it, things will be so high, you'll have hyperinflation. Now you got to give the people $50,000 a month just to survive. At some point, the numbers become moot. The numbers become irrelevant. See, you're not talking to the UBI, which I can see the argument for, but it ignores the reality that the economy's broke and that it's not broke in a stagnant way, that it's going to increasingly get worse. So a UBI is a brief temporary fix. Very brief, very temporary. And to some extent could cause inflation. I don't know. I'm not saying I'm opposed to a UBI. I'm just saying if you understand the reason for needing a UBI, you got a structural problem that you're trying to fix with a tactical solution, which will temporarily fix it. Well, I don't disagree with that. But structurally speaking, this thing's going bad. And there's so many holes in the structure. For instance, you have all of these stores that are open that don't have customers right now. You have all of these businesses in the US and probably all over Europe that they call zombie businesses that aren't making a price. Aren't making a profit. The car companies, none of these car companies are making a profit. Now people can't afford a $60,000 Toyota 4x4 or a 4Runner. You can't afford that. A 55, 65, 75, $85,000 pickup truck, 90,000 pickup. People can't afford that. So these companies are living off on borrowed time. So what Europe is doing now is it's simply the European leadership, might I add, as a result of these economic problems, as a result of these political problems, as a result of the crushing of the illusion of democracy. You've got leaders now who are in power, such as Keir Starmer, Macron, and Merz, who are living in that same period of time politically, where if you look at Starmer and you say, look at his numbers, he's a goner. Look at Macron, look at Merz, look at their numbers, they're goners. There's no way they can stay in but so long, which means it is inevitable. They are at that place in the chess game where everybody knows that the game is over, but there's still players on the board. All they are is chess players on a board when the game is already decided. These people are way under 20% approval rating. Macron's government has already collapsed, and there's no way out for him. What are they going to do? The people are in the street screaming. Starmer, the buzzards are circling Starmer's body, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, people are quitting. The economy is on the verge of collapse. The Starmer government is gone. Starmer's pretending like he's in power. And what are they doing? Their pretension that they're in power now is no longer based on anything internally. One of the things you hear people say, Mercoris talks about this. Starmer is the prime minister of Ukraine, not of Europe. Macron, the prime minister of Ukraine. Merz, the prime minister of Ukraine. They're the prime ministers. They're NATO/EU operatives. They have nothing. None of them are looking at their country. Merz came out and said, well, we got a lot of people in our country that are afraid of war, not me. In other words, the citizens don't want war. I don't give a damn about that because they're the ones that are going to die. So screw it. Same with Macron. Macron, I mean, you're looking at people in the street. Look at Italy. People are in the street saying, we're unhappy. Spain, they're going bananas about the genocide in Gaza. And their leaders are like, we got to lock people up who say anything about these Hamas-loving people. So morally speaking, they're completely separated from the population who are unhappy with what's happening in Palestine. Might I add, here's another sign of their trouble. The only people that they can hold on to when it comes to Russia is the people that they are able to continue to brainwash with Russia hate. The Russians are coming to get you. The Russians, they have to nonstop. Germany, look at the media in these countries, nonstop lies about Russia, nonstop lies about Hamas and, Israel being in so much trouble and Zionism, blah, blah, blah. They're in such trouble that they must nonstop lie to their people and try their best to propagandize their people. Nonstop, they've got to attack anybody who tries to tell the truth or gives an alternative perspective to their insane narratives. They're in deep trouble. When you are working 24 hours a day, treading water to try to propagandize people, to get them to believe something that you need them desperately to believe, and you're down far below 20% because they ain't buying it. Why? Because they're concerned about kitchen table issues. And you got to get them away from that, and you can't because their kitchen table ain't got no food on it, right? When you're in that position, I'm sorry, the game's already over, and they know it. So what are they doing? They are now trying to get attention from Daddy, from Uncle Sam. They're screaming out to Trump, we're in deep trouble. We need you to bail us out. We need to threaten Russia. Russia. We need to threaten Russia. We need to shoot their planes down. We need to do anything. In their desperation, they're trying to false flagathon. I mean, these absurd false flags. Right, and the false flags were all the same. We've got to defend ourselves from Russia because Russia is attacking us. Anything they can do to try to interpret it as an attack. And this is all about trying to bamboozle and trap the United States into staying in Europe, coming back to Europe. As the United States, U.S. leadership, for whatever reason, it's a whole nother story, tries to disentangle itself from Europe. The U.S. is saying, here's what we want to do. We want to sell you weapons. We want to sell you gasoline. We want to continue to strip you bare. We want all of your money. And you just continue to occupy Russia so that we can keep you there, weakening Russia. All of Europe, we want you to weaken Russia. But of course, we understand that you're going to get dramatically weaker, but we don't care. That's part of the game. You are economic cannon fodder in the same way that the Ukrainians are kinetic and physical and military cannon fodder. And if you become military cannon fodder too, that's fine. That's all right. But we got bigger fish to fry, whatever they may be. So the Europeans now there's this great battle. where the European leadership, if you want to call it that, where the European neocons are screaming at the top of their lungs, trying to hold on, cling on to the US, because they know this too, that if the US walks away, first of all, the US is the one that put them in power. The US is the one that US neocons put Starmer and Macron and Merz in power. And without the U.S. there to maintain their power, they're lost. They're done. They're finished. And not only might they lose power, the potential is there that they could be held accountable for their evil deeds. That someone could come to power and say, "We want to look at what you said." First of all, they can't afford that. They're so crooked. Look at von der Leyen. It's obvious that von der Leyen has been up to no good, and she's been filling her filthy, stinking pockets with funds from anywhere in the world that she could get them. They can't afford anybody to start lifting up the curtain and looking behind the curtain at the dirt they've been doing, least of all in Ukraine. One of the big reasons they have to hold on to Ukraine is the fear that the people in Ukraine will start talking. What happens if people start talking about potential drug use? From what I've seen, I believe that's a possibility by some of the European leaders. We saw that little incident on the train with a napkin, we were told, that was hidden by Merz and Starmer and Macron. There are no doubt we've got Starmer with some kind of Ukrainian male prostitutes burning down his cars and properties. Something weird's going on there, right? So my point being, man, there's a lot of dirt being hidden in Ukraine. And these ruling elite in Europe, particularly the out front puppets, cannot afford for that to come out. And they know good and well if Ukraine falls and Russia becomes the big dog in Ukraine, that these powerful Ukrainian people will do business with Russia and will sell or give up all the information they got on the European leaders in order to protect themselves. They'll say to the Russians, "Look, okay, you're in charge now. There's a certain element in Ukraine that'll say we've stolen a lot of money and we want to keep our money. We've stolen a lot of stuff, and so have the Europeans. If you'll back off of us and let us keep our money, if you'll back off of us and won't let us it won't throw us in jail and all that kind of stuff, we'll do business. We'll work with you, and we've got all the evidence you need on the dirt that these people have done. You know that evidence is in Ukraine for both the United States and for the Europeans. Now, whereas Trump doesn't really care, because the dirt is going to be on Biden, the dirt is going to be on neocons, the dirt is going to be on people that Trump doesn't like much anyway. So Trump doesn't need all the better that he'll come out and say the Bidens and the Lindsey Grahams of the world and the John McCains of the world and the Mitt Romneys of the world, Pelosi's of the world were in here stealing everything that wasn't nailed down. All the better for Trump. He ain't mad about that. Those are his political enemies anyway. But the Europeans were leadership, and a whole lot of Americans who are in on that crap are scared to death. And, they're trying to hold on. They can't let Ukraine fall because there's just too much information there that could destroy too many people. But Trump wants out. The Trump faction, forget Trump, the Trump faction wants out. For whatever reason, that's a whole different discussion. And they're trying to get out. I think Hegseth is meeting. I think the Trump faction is trying. It's a struggle. But I think they're trying to drag the neocons kicking and screaming out of Eastern Europe, period. And the European leadership it's gone. What the next leadership faction looks like in Europe, I don't know. And I agree. I've heard several people say this about the Russians, and I agree. Because this is the way I think. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe I'm projecting onto the Russians. Who knows? But I'd say this. I think if I'm the Russians, why don't we do this? Instead of projecting on the Russians, why don't I suddenly become the Russians? If I'm the Russians, here's what I think. And if you've been watching me, I've been saying this a long time. Time is on my side. I'm going to take these towns, and I'll even be able to project how slowly I take the towns. Oh boy, I've got Izium, Smizium, Frisium, whatever the hell, whatever, right? I'm taking that. And if the troops are moving too fast, whoa, hold your horses. Let's back up a little bit. Let's take our time. If I'm Russia, I want to kill time. I want to mark time. I don't want to take things fast because I don't want to create a position where these desperate lunatics can say to Trump or anybody else, okay, here's the time. We got to go. We got to move. We got to act. We are at a critical point. I don't want to create a critical point for this group of ruling elites because I'm looking at France and all these places ready to explode as their economic situation deteriorates, and they're going to explode politically. And I have to project that when they explode politically, the people and economically, the people in these countries will be so angry at their leadership that it'll be much more difficult to drag them into a war against Russia. And if their leadership says we got to go to war against Russia, they're going to be so pissed they'll cut their heads off. They ain't going to want to come fight me in Ukraine. So if I'm the Russians, I ain't in no rush. I'm in no rush. You know, I understand. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it just so happens that this is the way the war is going, right? Maybe it just so happens that the Russians are fighting the way they fight to exhaust their enemy and taking their time because that's the way they fight. Maybe it's that the Russians, as I'm arguing, are looking at this saying, time is on my side and I don't want to win this thing too fast because I get much greater benefit out of waiting until the ruling elite, current rules, people in the ruling elite fall. And then maybe even to some extent, the next group of people in the ruling elite may come to me and say, we're trying to build back. Can we buy some oil or gas from you? Of course, if I'm the Russians, the answer is no. I'd like to. I'd love to. I'd give them some drips, just a little bit, and it would be at maximum price. They would not get any benefit. It would not be, I'm going to sell you oil and gas at a cheap price. Therefore, you can rebuild your military, and then the ruling elite can come back in and they'll have enough money to attack me. No, if I'm going to sell you anything, sorry, it's going to be at spot market prices. You can buy just like anybody else on the international market. But as far as me giving you a good price because it's through the pipeline, that's not going to happen. Sorry, I'm selling it out. It's going east. So I think the Russians are in a position to slow walk things, and that's what they're doing, to recognize that the current state of affairs with the current ruling elite is precarious, shall we say, that they have a tenuous grip on power, and that rather than force their hand and give them the opportunity to scream that we are in a terrible, tragic, and desperate situation, and we're forced to act now, whatever that act may be, militarily or whatever, against Russia, that it's much more advantageous to me to, in the same way that I'm the Russian leadership, I'm keeping the pressure on in Ukraine, that I've got this long contact line and I'm not attacking in one place. I'm leaning heavily on the whole line, keeping pressure everywhere. No place along this line do I want you resting. I want you getting shot at. I want you getting bombed. I want you getting artillery everywhere on the line. I want you to have to hold us off, right? You do the same thing to the European ruling elite. You continue to keep pressure on them in every way you can, but you don't want to break through. You don't want to push them down. You want everybody to look like to do what we're doing, to look at the board and say, there's no move you can make, European elite, you've lost. But the European elite can't afford to turn the chessboard over. They have to pretend, no, I could move this pawn, this king, this queen. And you're like, no, you couldn't. You're going to lose. Yes, I could. Yes, I could. And then at that point, you say, well, try it. Keep the game going. See how that lasts. And now they're, well, I'll move this. Okay, the Russians move there. Oh, crap. Well, now how about over here? You want to put them in a position, if you're Russia, where out of desperation, they're trying to pretend that the game can be extended. And by extending the game, it will give them a chance to win. There ain't no chance of winning. There's no chance now. They've already lost. And here's the deal in that chess game that's already over and everybody knows it, but one side's pretending like it ain't. The observers are looking, in this instance, Trump. And Trump is saying, I say Trump, the Trump faction of the ruling elite in the United States, are looking at the board and they're saying, basically amongst themselves, excuse me, and in some ways the European elite, they're looking at the game saying, Europe, yeah, the game's over. Europe, no, it's not. It's not. We got to keep this game going. We can win. And they're looking at the chessboard saying, no, if you move here, they move here. If you move there, they move. No, the game's over. You've lost. You got to try to find a way out. If you think of Trump's nature, right? I've said this, you can't corner Trump. Why? Because he just changes the story. I mean, that's his superpower. Not that I'm a great fan of Trump. Ideologically, I don't align with Trump, and I don't think he's a very competent leader, to be quite frank. But I'd say this, but he does have a superpower, and his superpower is you can't corner him. Ever. Trump don't care what he says today. Trump comes out today and says, yes, as I've always said, Zelensky's a dictator. And as soon as they come at him next day and said, you said Zelensky's dictator. Did I say that? I don't remember saying that. He doesn't care what he said yesterday. So he can't really be cornered, because even if you catch him saying something, he'll just say, I didn't say it. Catch him doing something, he'll say, I didn't do it. I don't know what you're talking about. He doesn't care. He can't be cornered. He'll just change things. Nah, hey, on August 8th, we're going to sanction China and India, and everybody gets sanctioned. August 8th, you come to them, you're going to sanction them? Nah, I think we're going to do that. He don't care that he said it. You'd be like, but you told us you were going to do it. Yeah, let's move on. We don't need to talk about these sanctions. Who's talking about tariffs? Let's move on. Hey, look, we're building a new ballroom. He don't give a crap. The Europeans don't understand that they can't. They're trying to corner a guy that can't be cornered. He's a squirmy little guy. You try to grab him, he'll squirm out of your hands. That's what Trump's going to do. And if he doesn't want to do something, he'll just keep squirming. He'll come out. Yes, the Russians are going to lose, and the Ukrainians are going to win. Therefore, I guess you won't be needing me. Now, Alexander, of course, says that's a bad move because they're going to throw that up in his face. I agree. At some point, they're going to throw this up in Trump's face. But based on what I've seen with Trump, he doesn't care if they throw it up in his face. They're going to come to them and say, see, you said this, so you got to act. Trump don't care what he said in the past. It doesn't matter. It implies to say that they're going to throw Trump's tweet in his face later. And later on, at some point, they're going to say to Trump, well, Trump, you said X, that the Russians are going to lose, and now they're not losing, so therefore fill in the blank. No, I don't remember saying that. No, I've always said that the Russians are powerful. Look, they made a mistake. The Russians defeated Hitler. The Russians got a war machine. We knew the Russians. Everybody knew the Russians was going to win. He'll just ignore what he said in that tweet. He doesn't. He won't arrest it, and he won't even erase the tweet. He'll just ignore it. He'll give a crap. So, under normal circumstances, a normal politician, it would be an error for him to make a tweet of this nature and box himself in. Not Trump. Not Trump. It don't matter what he said. It doesn't matter about that tweet. He'll ignore it and say that he said the opposite. Don't matter. So now the Europeans, I think, to some extent, are left hanging out. And to them, it's like, can we create conflict with Russia? Can we get the Americans to re-engage before our people cut our freaking heads off? See, that's where they are. They're between a rock and a hard place. They're between their narrative about the Russians attacking all of Europe falling apart, because the Russians ain't attacking all of Europe. So they're between that narrative falling apart and the narrative that their economy is strong enough to go to war with Russia, to last through a war with Russia, to keep on going. So the narrative is we're strong enough to fight Russia versus a reality. And the narrative is we can keep going. Our economy will be okay. Facing an underlying reality that they have structural problems economically, structural deficit problems, and no way to get out of them. And that the war against Russia, not only is it that they can't hold on and they can't keep fighting, that is the very thing that's underlying their economic infrastructure. That's undermining, undermining their economic infrastructure, the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, they're like, yes, we've got to tariff and sanction everybody, which they can't do. They're unable to do. Come on, Trump. And Trump kind of called their bluff and said, all right, let's go ahead and do it. You guys first. They said, we can't do it. So now the only thing they got left is false flags. Is only thing they got left is arguing that the Russians are doing this. We got to shoot down Russia. We got to do this and that. Well, guess what? They're saying a no-fly zone in Russia. What does a no-fly zone in Russia mean? It means the U.S. comes in and does the no-fly zone, which the U.S. can't even do the no-fly zone and ain't going to do it. It means we've got to stand up to Russia and we've got to shoot planes down. What does that mean? That means the U.S. doing it. All of this means the U.S. does it because let me put it like this: as their economic infrastructure collapsed, as their industrial infrastructure collapsed, certainly that means that their military infrastructure has collapsed. Right? That means that if you don't have industry and you don't have money, that means you don't have a war machine because you got to build your war machine and you've got to finance your war machine, and they can do neither. So they're in the terrible position of having their war machine collapse as their economy collapses, as their political legitimacy collapses, as their alliance with Big Daddy in Washington, D.C. collapses. I mean, it don't get no worse than that for Europe. No money, no war machine, no transatlantic alliance, no political legitimacy at home or on the world stage. As your people, growing numbers of people in your countries, in your economic and political bloc, become angry at the totalitarian, authoritarian measures that are necessary. These measures are necessary to maintain power for the current group of ruling elite. They've got to shut their mouth. They cannot allow this. Look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do things that the masses don't like. If that is the case, which it is, then in fact, totalitarian measures are a must. It's the only way to stay in power now. And so I'll end by saying this. When that person gets the punch and they're out on their feet, wham, and they collapse, they freeze for a second. How long is that second? I don't think it's going to be long in political time. I don't think it's going to be long. I think now, we're going into a winter. I think the Russians are not going to do something to make a big splash. Meanwhile, the Europeans are false flagging it to death, hoping that they can cause some kind of a conflict with Russia to drag the Americans back in. I think the decision has been made amongst the ruling elite in Washington, D.C. Look, we continue to do this thing. We're going to have to leave the Europeans on their own. We'll just continue to suck off them. We'll take their money for energy. Don't buy any energy from Russia. Buy it from us at 7 times the price. We'll continue to take their money. Hey guys, make sure you buy lots of equipment, military equipment from us and send it straight to Ukraine to be blown to smithereens. Oh, by the way, you ain't getting it for 3 or 4 years, most of it anyway. Just give us the money and put it on order. So we're just going to continue to take your money. We'll watch you collapse from afar and laugh at you. And then I guess from Trump's perspective, it's a win-win situation because he feels, based on the ideological direction of Europe right now, that there will be people who come to power potentially who are much more aligned with his ideological and political beliefs than the current crop of elites in Europe. So that's where we are. I want to thank everybody. Let me see. Let's see what we got in the way of super chats. So far, I've only seen one. So we're going to chase down that one and see what we can find. We're going to see. I only got one. And in the words of Trump, I only got one super chat, and I don't like it. I don't like it. That's what Trump always says. All right. Trump is literally a pro wrestling heel, not even figuratively, literally. Absolutely. Well, let me just say this about that. That's what people want is pro wrestling right now. If I may explain. In a book by Roland Barthes called Mythologies, he explores the wrestling as politics metaphor, in which the argument is made, and quite, I think, accurately. When you watch a wrestling match, you see the bad guy, right? And he's the bad guy. He's the Iron Sheik. He's whatever, right? He's the bad guy. And then you see the good guy and the bad guy. Now, here's the reality. You know that in life, they're not really good guys or bad guys. But you also know that you get the same feeling as though they were good guys and bad guys. You feel like you're on the side of good because you want this guy to win. And you're opposed to bad because you want that bad guy that's been presented to you to lose. They ain't good guys or bad guys, but you get the same feeling. Why? Because that's all you can get anymore. You can't get a reality. There's not good guys and bad guys for you to attach to. So instead, you just take the feeling of good guys and bad guys. So you can get the dopamine rush. So you can get the this great feeling that you're on the side of good. That's pro wrestling. Pro wrestling it ain't real, but you get the same good feeling as though it was real. You get the same hyped up feeling. You get the same excitement as though it was real. That's all you got left in politics now. Donald Trump gives people, he makes people jump with joy. They're so happy they love Trump. Now people are waking up to realize that Trump is an entertainer and that he ain't in charge. Let me just say this: when you saw Joe Biden stumbling around off the stage, when you saw Joe Biden doing that, that should have been a clue that the president ain't in charge. So that when Trump came in, you should have known the president is not in charge. And now we got a new face. So that face ain't obviously in charge. That's all you need to know. Hey, Joe Biden, that was a great speech. What do you think? Then if that, like, he doesn't know where to get off the stage, like he's confused. He can find his way off stage. That tells you that he wasn't in charge of anything. And if he wasn't in charge of anything, what makes you think the next guy would be in charge of anything? He ain't. He ain't. That's why sometimes I'll say Trump, because I mean the collective Trump. I mean the faction that makes the decisions around Trump. I ain't saying Trump has no decision-making power whatsoever, but understanding its limits is important. And it has its limits. He does have some decision-making authority, but it is greatly limited. And it's like the question of free will, right? The philosophical discussion of whether or not we have free will. The philosophical discussion of whether Trump has power when Trump has people around him that funded him, that gave him lots of money. A billionaire Zionist apparently gave him up to $500 million. So when Trump makes decisions that appear to be his own decisions, he still has to take that into account. So even the areas where he may appear to have independent free will decisions, the underlying factors that influence him, what compromise is out there on him, and as a faction of the ruling elite, which of his views are completely determined by his economic and social status, right? So how much free will does he have? How many decisions does he make? What's affected by his political, ideological class, etc.? Who gave him money? In the end, I don't think there's a lot of free will left there. All right, one could say that about everybody, right? Let me see. Are there any more super chats? I don't. Oh! I see another one. Here we go. Raphael says, "You call my country paper tiger. Paper tiger. It is on. Putin is soft, no dignity. Something is not right. Insult is like compliment for him." Here's the thing. I'll say this. As a man who studies Zen, here's what I would say. I think the Russians have a certain Zen about them, and here's what I mean. A man of Zen is not easily offended. You call me a paper tiger. It's like this. It's like a little kid in elementary school, and somebody goes, "You're a sissy." Oh, he goes, and he's going to fight or whatever. Why? Because he's responded to this guy called him a sissy, right? As opposed to, let's say he was a child of Zen, and says, "You're a sissy," and he goes, and And he goes on back to class. Why? Yeah, what do I care that you call me a sissy? What do I care? What? How? Yeah, offended? What do I care? You got a right to say that. Garland, you're a jerk. Interesting. Hmm. And I continue drinking my coffee. Well, what? You're a jerk. I continue drinking my coffee. You have no right to call me a jerk. What do I care? I'm not offended. So you call my country a paper tiger. The only thing that matters is whether I am a paper tiger. And that's where the Russians are. You can call me anything in the world. You punch me, I'm going to knock your ass out. There's a guy sitting there saying, you're a jerk. You're an idiot. Whatever. You're a sissy, a chump. You can't fight. All right. Just sits there and drinks his coffee. Put a hand on me, and you're going to have a problem. A real bad one in a hurry. But as long as you stand over there and call my country a paper tiger and call me a jerk and blah, 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 it ain't a one. You're soft. You can call me soft all you want to. You put a hand on me, though, you're going to have a terrible problem. You can't fight. Okay. I can't fight. Then you swing and see what happens. Now, I ain't going to say that. In the back, I'm just sitting here sipping my coffee. In the back of my mind, it's like, I'm not offended. I don't care what you say. You mean nothing to me. As long as you don't put your hands on me, you're good. Yeah, you get froggy. You're going to get a big surprise that you really had planned. So that's why I say, Raphael, you call my country a paper tiger, it's on. No, it ain't. Not for a man of Zen. He sees that as weakness. You call me a name, I see that as weakness. I don't see that as strength. Strength doesn't need to do that. Weakness is crying out for attention. We crying out to insult me. Why are you insulting me? Because when a person punches or cuts you, they want to see blood. They want to see a wound. Rather than, I'll go with the Zen perspective, it's like throwing a rock down a well and not hearing a splash. What happens if you call me you're a paper tiger, Garland, and I just sit there and keep drinking my coffee? You don't even know if I heard you or not. You get nothing from me. No reaction, nothing. Just sitting there drinking coffee. You're a chump, a sissy. Just sitting there drinking my coffee. As long as you don't try anything, I'm fine. I'll keep an eye on you. That's your words. Means nothing. I think that's where Russia is. Yeah, we're good. You can threaten to shoot our planes down. You can threaten all kinds of things. But if you do it, you can call us paper tigers. Good enough. Everybody knows who the paper tiger is. We don't have to argue with you about that. So that's where I disagree with you, Raphael. I think to some extent, Putin is a man of Zen. I think, as you said, insult is like a compliment for him. Something is not right. I would say something is right. Is right. I think the Russians understand the difference between a yappy mouth, what's the old saying, an alligator mouth and a Tweety bird ass. Do all this talking, but you ain't gonna swing. Tell you that much. You're gonna do a lot of talking, but you ain't gonna swing. All right, let me continue. Any more? I think that's it for the super chat. That's it. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks a lot, everybody over on Rockfin. Thanks very much. Certainly appreciate it. Raphael and everybody that did the super chats, let me remind you that I want to thank all my Patreon people. And buy me a coffees and PayPal, all the people who contribute to keep the channel going. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And if you can afford it, there's all your options. And of course, I got a P.O. Box, P.O. Box 32, Glen Burnie, Maryland, 21061, where you can snail mail. You can do a donation. You can send a card. You can send a letter. People send pictures. People send gifts, hats. I've gotten patches. I've gotten, somebody actually sent me some really great, nice shirts, great shirts. And I'm like, wow, how did they know I wear a size large? I don't know. It's kind of scary. Maybe they came in my house and looked around my closet. But thanks if they did. All right, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks, everybody. Share this on all your social media platforms. I'm out.